that if you're seeing this, then that means the prayer that I've been making with every single ounce of hope left in my body has been answered. Thank God. I've been trying for the last 3.5 hours to get through any way possible to the outside world with no luck. And I'm no computer expert, but the water damage my laptop has suffered must have severely fucked up the satellite link up something fierce. Any attempt to reach any website, be it the official Coast Guard one, or even most social media sites like Facebook or Twitter, have all yielded with the computer crashing and rebooting. But for reasons unknown to me, Reddit, or I should be more specific and say, this particular page on Reddit managed to load perfectly without any issues. So I'm asking here, and now if anyone reads this, for help. For the record, my name is Nathan Rogers. I'm 33 years old, and I was the helmsman of a fishing vessel called the Point of No Return. I say was because currently she's thousands of feet beneath my feet and the churning surface of the North Atlantic. But I'm getting ahead of myself in case anything happens to us before anyone reads this, or I permanently lose connection. I should give as much of a detailed account as I can. That way, someone might know where to find us, or at least know what happened. We left our home port of Portsmouth, New Hampshire, about a week and a half ago, bound for the Grand Banks off the coast of Newfoundland. The Point of No Return is a longliner, and our aim was mainly to catch swordfish along with cod and haddock. The prime season for a good haul is coming to a close, and with our haul during the summer falling short of our usual quota, we decided to make one final run to try and make some extra dough. So when we arrived, we started off hauling in many good-sized fish. Everyone was happy. Woo! Hell yeah. That's what I'm talking about. Called Spencer, the youngest member of our crew, as the first fish, was hauled on board. But it was short-lived. After a few days, we began to fail to catch anything. It was as if all the fish had disappeared from the area. With our holds not even a quarter full, Abe, our captain, made the call to sail even farther east, to the Flemish Cap. Thanks to a few of us making the mistake of watching the perfect storm to pass the time on the trip out, a few of us understandably had reservations about going so far from any landmass, but the captain pointed out the obvious. Boys, I wish it weren't necessary to do, he began, rubbing his thick white beard, but it's either try to cap or go home broke. He looked to the sky, which looked clear. Besides, the radar says there shouldn't be any storms for the duration of our trip. Up until now, I'd never believed in the concept of jinxing, but I can't help but swear that he jinxed the hell out of us with those words. We made way for the cap and reached it about a day or so later. To our shock and, of course, our elation, we began to haul in a metric fuck ton of fish. And any apprehensiveness we had melted away like butter in a pan, and we all became infected by the thought of how much money we were going to make. Until, that is, the dark pause began to move in on the horizon. I'd been at my station at the helm, and I looked out the starboard windows to see the ominous darkness rolling towards us. What the hell? According to the weather reports, the nearest storm was hundreds of miles away. And yet, here I was staring one dead in the face
You gotta be fucking kidding me, I muttered, flicking on the ship's autopilot and walking for the door that led outside.
I pushed it open, the thick smell of the ocean and fish wafting over me. And looking down at the aft deck, I saw the captain helping the others ready the Lawrence for their next drop. I yelled out, raising my voice to be heard above the boombox, blasting out hard rock music. He glanced up, shielding his eyes so he could see me better. I stabbed my finger towards the gathering storm, which occasionally flashed with lightning. I still perfectly remember how the captain's face filled with shock and surprise as he turned to see it. The rest of the crew turned and spotted it as well. Oh, that's just great. Will, another of our crew, shouted out exasperatedly, dropping the hooks and lines to the deck. The rest of the crew let our curses, and some turned to the captain, asking him questions I couldn't hear over the music. After speaking to them for a minute, he walked over and turned off the boombox before making his way up the steps to stand beside me. Where exactly in the hell did that come from? He muttered, pulling his hat off his head and scratching at the tufts of gray hair that remained there. I don't know, sir, I admitted, watching another bolt of lightning flash inside it. All I know is I was at my station looking around. 1 minute, I don't see it, and the next, I trailed off. I followed the man back into the wheelhouse as he walked to the radar display. For a moment, he stared down at it, then lightly began to smack it. Piece of shit, he growled. What's wrong? I asked him. He gestured to the screen. The stupid radar must be on the fritz again. It doesn't show the storm on the radar at all. A small wave of confusion swept over me. I personally repaired the system the last time it womped out, and as far as I knew, it had been working perfectly. But as I stepped next to him, I saw he was right. No storm clouds were displayed on the radar in the direction the storm was coming from. What the? A shiver rushed up my spine, one I didn't understand why it had. The cabin was warm and comfortable, and yet it felt as if I just walked through thick fog. Finding my voice, I looked at the captain, who held a thoughtful gaze. So, what do we do? He took a second to answer, then sighed. I'm not going to risk you boys or my ship, especially not after we have a good catch in the hold. Start plotting us a course back to Portsmouth. Hopefully we'll manage to stay just ahead of the storm. And with that, he turned and left the wheelhouse, heading back outside to help the others store the gear in preparation for our departure. You could hear the faint sound of them yelling to each other as they rushed about, the music playing again as well. I walked to the starboard windows and gazed out. The storm appeared closer now, the lightning flashes becoming more frequent. A particularly bright flash came, and for a moment my eyes locked on a particular cloud formation that had been silhouetted in it. I blinked my eyes rapidly. The rational side of my brain attempting to wrangle in the other. No, there's no way you just saw that. Full well storms play tricks on your eyes. Shaking my head, I returned to the helm, turning off the autopilot and nudging the throttle forwards, hearing the rumble of the engines increase. I kept telling myself that I'd been seeing things, but another shiver ran up my spine as I couldn't shake the image from my mind. The image of a cloud formed into the shape of a human skull. We only made it about 7 or 8 miles west when the storm overtook us. I've been on the water my entire life and been fishing on commercial vessels since I was 18 years old. I've seen many strange and sometimes unexplainable things, and I've seen my fair share of storms, some very bad, but I'm not exaggerating when I tell you I've never seen a storm as fierce as this one. 20 minutes after the dark gray, almost black clouds slid over my head, the point of no return was being hammered by 12 to 14-foot swells, crashing water onto the deck. The wind howled as fiercely as a banshee, and the world around us turned almost pitch black, the only illumination coming from the almost blinding flashes of lightning, which were followed by roars of thunder. I gripped the helm with hands that had begun turning white at the knuckles, bracing my legs for each impact. The captain stood beside me, gripping the metal railing next to the helm to keep from falling. "Just keep going," he yelled to me. Some of the crew stood behind us, staring out at the maelstrom with wide, frightened eyes. It was a fear that I found infectious, for as much as I kept calm for all outer appearances. Inside, I was terrified. As horrifying as horror movie monsters are made out to be, they don't hold a candle to the existential dread and terror that Mother Nature at her worst can instill you with. Suddenly, Wyatt, one of our engineers, flew up the stairs from below. "Captain, we're taking on water somewhere, and I can't find the source." I saw many of my crew's faces go pale, but the captain remained calm. "All of you, get below and help Strosky find the source and either patch it or seal it. Then start the pumps to get the water in the boat out." And for a moment, nobody moved until he barked again. "Do you want to end up at the bottom of the ocean? Move your asses." That got their attention, and they quickly followed Wyatt down the stairs to the crew quarters and lower decks. As we crested another huge swell, I spared a glance at the radar screen. It still showed no sign of the storm on its green screen as the line made its way around in a circle. I shook my head, feeling a strange feeling one I couldn't place come over me, but I pushed it away, forcing myself to focus. "Everyone's counting on you, mate. Keep your head in the game and pray to the Lord above you. Make it out of this. Things are mean." I shot a glance at the captain. "You really think we're going to make it through this, Gabe?" I asked, the seriousness in my using his first name, making him look hard at me before clapping a hand on my shoulder. "With a good crew and a terrific at helm, son, yes, I do," he declared, pulling out a pipe from his pocket and lighting it. Thick, hazy smoke filled the room as he spoke again. "I've been through far worse than this, after all." I doubted the man's words, that I tried to let them bring some much-needed comfort to me. A large wave crashed over the boat, splashing the front windows with water and obscuring my view ahead for a few moments. When it cleared, the world outside was again pitch black. The outer lights of the boat barely illuminating 20 feet around us. A strong vibration suddenly emanated from the floor beneath my feet, and I shot a glance down at the metal. "What the hell was that?" And my answer was given a moment later as another crew member, Andrew, ran up the stairs. He was soaked with seawater, and his eyes darted around in their sockets in a panic. Captain, the pumps are working their hardest, but we're taking on more water than they can expel. And we can't find the source of the leak either.
The captain cursed and turned to me.
So, Mason, hold fast up here and keep us moving east. I'm going to go below and try and help. Not giving me a chance to answer, he turned away, beginning to head towards the companionway stairs. I just turned back to look out the windows when the brightest flash of lightning came, turning the world around us from night to day. It also revealed something dead ahead, something that made my heart almost stop. Oh, fuck my life. I shot in a whimper. Racing towards the point of no return was a roadway, one that dwarfed all the swells around us. My mind screamed at me that it had to be at least 30 or 40 feet high, enough that it blocked out the sky ahead. Captain, I screamed at the top of my lungs. I heard him stop, then the sound of his footsteps as he dashed back next to me. I heard him breathe. Mate, turn us broadside into the wave. Our only hope is for us to roll over completely. I turned to see him snatching for the microphone handset, which connected the wheelhouse to the ship's intercom as I began ripping the helm to port. Behind me, I heard Andrew let out a strangled scream as he spied the behemoth racing towards us. All hands, we have a rogue wave incoming. Brace for impact, the captain shouted into the mic. Below, I heard the terrified shouts of the crew spring up. I clenched the helm in a death grip as tears silently poured out of my eyes. In my head, the scene from The Perfect Storm flashed, the Andrea Gale being flipped and driven into the ocean. I only had enough time for one quick thought. Please God, the wave smashed into us with all the force of a dozen runaway semi-trucks. The port side windows of the ship shattered into 1,000 pieces, and freezing seawater rushed over us in a seemingly unending wave. For a moment, my mind was unable to comprehend what had happened, and then it began screaming at me as I felt the world begin to rotate. We're fucking underwater. We're flipping underwater in a wave. And so the realization horrified me, and I felt certain that we would begin sinking like a stone to the bottom of the ocean. I let out a silent prayer for my death to be quick. And then, to my astonishment, we emerged back into the world above the waves. I looked, the shock at still being alive froze me in place. I looked around. I spied the captain, who'd locked his arms in a death grip around the metal bar next to me. Andrew had been tossed to the back of the wheelhouse. I saw a large gash in his head as he stumbled to his feet, coughing out water. Instantly, the captain ran to the stairs and shouted down them, "Somebody get up here and give me a damage report." As he did, I looked down at the screens in front of me. I felt a wave of despair wash over me as I saw most had short-circuited after their meeting with the ocean. The radar still glowed green, though the screen crackled and flickered as though we would go out in a second. Wyatt appeared at the top of the stairs, blood dripping from his right arm and soaked to the bone. "Give me some good news, Wyatt," the captain yelled over the howl of the wind that screamed into the wheelhouse through the broken windows. To me, it sounded almost more like a plea than a demand. Wyatt shook his head The port side engine is dead, sir. Starboard is still running, but barely. Our main generator is dead, and the backup is running everything at full capacity. He let out a shaky breath and looked at the floor before finishing. And the pumps are dead ass. For a moment, nobody spoke. The implications of the man's words hung like nooses around all our necks. Pumps were dead, and so were we. It was only a matter of time before the ship filled up with too much water and foundered. And we're now running on borrowed time, I thought, numbly. When the captain spoke again, his tone was more subdued. So go down below and tell the men to gather all the emergency supplies they can. So food, water, first aid kits. Have them bring the life raft up and set it down. And we'll stay with the ship as long as she'll take us. Then we'll abandon ship into the raft. Wyatt began to speak. Captain, with all due respect, these waves will tear apart the captain cut him off. Don't argue with me, just do it, he barked. Wyatt took a step back, then turned wordlessly and headed back down the gangway. Wyatt then turned to Andrew, who had begun shaking slightly, a result of both the freezing water covering him in fear. Andrew, try the radio and send out a distress call. You know the drill. For a moment, the younger man stood as still as a statue. And then he rushed to the radio and he jammed his hand down on the transmit button. 8, Mayday, meeting. This is the fishing vessel, point of no return, registration number 57306. We're approximately, somewhere up the coast of Newfoundland, and we need urgent assistance. Our ship is taking on water and sinking. Does Anna need? I tuned his words out as he began to repeat, turning instead to look out the broken windows. So I didn't say it out loud, but I knew we were royally fucked. And I don't know anything we're going to take out why it's right. These waves will tear that raft to pieces long before anyone reaches us. The numbness began to spread as I was faced with the unavoidable thought that these might be the final minutes of my life. Moments of my past flashed in front of my eyes. Growing up as a child in Portsmouth, spending weekends at friends of my mother's in Kittery Point, visiting BG's boathouse with my mother and aunt, my relationship with Dana, my ex. A single image suddenly appeared in my mind. My friends and family crowded around a cross, commemorating us, crying, and my breath began to come in short, ragged gasps as I tried to force away the image.
Your dog?
Sound snapped me out of my inner battle with my mortality, and I blinked for a second. What the? Then it came again. Looking down, I watched the flickering screen as the line made its way around again. This time, as the sound rang through the wheelhouse a third time, I saw the large shape appear. and it sent a bolt of renewed hope through me. Captain, I've got something on the radar. The sound of Andrew's distress call stopped as both men turned towards me. I think it's a ship. Instantly, the man was at my side, gazing down at the screen. I don't believe it. You're right. He breathed out in an astonished tone. There. Then, he locked eyes with me.
Are you thinking what I'm thinking, me? He asked. I swallowed.
Gabe, right now, there isn't much of an alternative. He looked at me for another second before nodding. No. Then head approximately south-southwest and pour on the power. For the next 20 minutes, we crashed through the storm in silence, aside from Andrew, who'd returned to attempting a distress call. And finally, he gave up. Captain, the rogue wave must have snapped off our radio antenna, he said. Still, we continued on. I strained my eyes against the lashing wind and rain pouring through the windows, praying to catch sight of our only chance at survival. And then, in the flash of lightning, I saw it. Even a few miles away from us, I could tell the ship was huge. She rose almost imposingly out of water, rolling up and down in the waves of the storm. Another flash of lightning showed that her hull was black, while her upper decks were painted white. Two large red and black smokestacks rose into the sky, almost disappearing out of sight. I heard the captain let out a low whistle as he spotted it as well, and she's got to be, 800 feet long? I called over the wind.
Try more like 1,000, he yelled back. By now, most of the rest of the crew had reappeared from below deck.
They'd brought the gear the captain had ordered up and had packed it into waterproof bags. And I'd also requested that the satellite, phone, and laptop be brought up as well. Unfortunately, the phone was very much dead from being submerged, but the laptop, according to Will, was able to be salvaged. When they caught sight of the giant ship, they let out cheers and turned to hug one another. I realized I hadn't been the only one feeling that death was breathing down my necks. As we drew within half a mile of the ship, I realized something was off. Captain, she's dead in the water, not moving at all. And, if she'd been under power, it would have taken longer to draw near. The captain looked hard, then nodded. You're right, she must have snapped off her mooring lines in the storm somewhere. It's a ghost ship, adrift. I saw the crew's faces fall at the news. So, what do we do now? Kenny, the other engineer, asked. The captain turned to them as I steered us closer. We stick to the plan. We draw alongside her and find a way aboard. We transfer our equipment on board, and then we'll go from there. The look of hope returned in some of their eyes, but I saw apprehension enter others. So I didn't claim one bit. Fear still coursed through my veins. All it takes is one screw up, one mistake, and we're all dead. The captain ordered me to move around to the ship's port side so as to give us a small bit of shelter from the storm. He then snapped on the powerful searchlight, which thankfully hadn't been taken out by the wave, and traced it over the ship. A few minutes later, I heard him let out a triumphant laugh. Nate! Move us next to the middle of a ship. There's a ladder dangling there. He was right. I saw the white lines and wooden steps flailing about in the wind. Staring a glance behind us and seeing that the ocean was beginning to creep over the back of the transom, I hastily maneuvered the point of no return over to the ladder, nudging the throttle into neutral as we drew alongside. Sparing a glance out the open side door, I saw Spencer and Will reaching out with boat hooks to snatch the ladder. And the two men hooked it and lashed it to our railing. Okay, one man at a time, get the gear and get up there, you yelled. Slowly, almost painfully, the 8 members of our crew made their way up the ladder and onto the ship. As I watched Wyatt climb out of sight, the sound caught my attention. I looked down to see all of the remaining gauges die, and the sound of the remaining engine idling died away. Crap. Almost immediately afterwards, I became aware of a new sound. It was one that spurred a new wave of panic in me. It was the sucking sound of the sea rapidly flooding the point of no return. Captain, she's going under, I screamed, snatching up the last bag of supplies. I saw the man give an almost pained look as he cast a final look at the vessel he'd worked his entire life to afford before shouting at me and Kenny, the last 2 aboard besides himself. All right, boys, abandon ship. Kenny went up the ladder first, and able to wait for him to make it all the way up. The captain and I unsnapped a ladder from our railing and began climbing after him. We were halfway up whenever the second sound increased to a fever pitch. Stopping and sparing a look below me, I saw the point of no return's bow lift out of the water as her stern slipped below the waves. She rapidly began to sink, and I turned to continue climbing. That was when a scream came from overhead. I snapped my gaze up to see a body fall past me, missing me by less than a foot. For a moment, shock kept my mind from working until I realized who I'd seen in the split second flash of lightning. Sex! I screamed out into the dark, but when the lightning flashed again, I saw no sign of him floating in the waves. Only the bow of our ship as it finally slipped below the waves. I shouted the man's name again, the wind tearing the cry from my lips, and off into the storm. Nathan, he's gone, came a cry from below me. I shot a look down, seeing the captain looking up at me with a horrified expression. Get up the ladder, he ordered. I fought my emotions for a moment and climbed as quickly as I could for the railing. A few moments later, both the captain and I hauled ourselves over, collapsing onto the wooden deck with sputtering coughs and groans. When I raised my head, it was to see the ashen face of Wyatt looking down at us. "Where's Tenny?" he cried. I took in a shaky breath and shook my head slowly at him. I saw the shock and horror flash into his face. The same happened to all of the men standing behind him. And for my part, I simply felt numb. And even though I'd lost my aunt to ovarian cancer in 2009, I'd lost one of my mom's family friends to a brain tumor in 2012, I'd never actually seen someone die before. Not in real life, anyways. My mind was a jumble. I couldn't think properly. It was only thankfully though, the captain stood up and spoke up, his voice shaking only for a second before hardening. As hard as this may be for everyone, we need to get inside and out of the storm. We'll have time to be able to grieve later. Right now, we need to get away from the wind and rain before we catch pneumonia or hypothermia. His words seemed to bolster everyone, even myself, and we all stood, gathering our supplies and moving to find a door inside. After a few minutes searching, we found one. And after stamping on the waterproof flashlights we all had, we stepped inside the ship. Instantly, The sound of the howling wind grew fainter as we found ourselves inside a companionway of some kind. It seemed like it was meant for the crew. It seemed more Spartan and function over form than what I'd seen from the rest of the ship. Nobody said a word as we made our way down until we came to another door. Will, being the first in line, reached out and opened it, and we stepped into what I can only describe as the most luxurious lounge I've ever been in. The walls were plastered with wood that reflected back in the glow of our lights. What appeared to be marble lined the ceiling overhead. I saw dozens on tables and chairs, ones that had once been scattered across the room, lying overturned or on their sides. No doubt thrown about by the storm. Walking further into the room, I turned to the left and aimed my flashlight at the wall, and nearly jumped out of my skin as my light reflected off a huge face that gazed back at me. Jesus, and I shouted, feeling my heart begin a marathon in my chest.
What is it? I heard Andrew call out. All the men ran to me and aimed their lights at what I'd seen.
Instantly, the tension that filled the room was replaced by the sounds of laughter. Fucking hell, mate. Are you really that afraid of the Queen of England? Manny, another of our crew, asked as he fought for breath. I let out a shaky breath of my own as I played my light over what I now saw was a painting. One of Queen Elizabeth II. Then I began to laugh along with them. Good Lord, Nathan, you really are the pussy. For a minute, we all stood there laughing and feeling the mood lighten somewhat. The levity is helped lighten the sadness that we all felt. It was cut short by the captain's voice as a loud rumble of thunder came from outside. All right, everyone, change into dry clothes and break out the sleeping bags. So, yeah, then get some sleep. This has been one of the worst days of our lives. We need to rest. Tomorrow we'll take stock of the ship and figure out what to do next. And with that, everyone began to fan out, finding a lone corner to change in without being seen. And as they did, I approached the captain. Gabe, I said, tapping the man on the shoulder. He turned to look at me, and I instantly saw the haunted look in his eyes when I wanted to say something. Say that it wasn't his fault. Instead, I told him I wanted to stay up a little, get the laptop out, and try and get a signal from the satellite connection to try and find a way to send out a call for help. After a moment's hesitation, he agreed, gesturing towards the vast amount of chairs and tables. Go ahead, just try and get some sleep afterwards. I nodded, then patted him again on the shoulder before turning away. That's where I am now, but I changed into dry clothes and found a thick cushioned armchair on its side and read. I sat it upright, then pulled out the laptop. The battery was thankfully fully charged, and I have a solar charger if it gets low, which survived. But as I said at the start, it had to have sustained some kind of water damage because it won't let me go to many, if any, sites. Only this one, I'm the only one of us left awake now. All around me, I can hear the snores of my fellow crew members, hear them rolling over to get comfortable on the carpeted floors. I still hear the rain pounding on the roof of the great ship, hear the thunder rumble, and feel the ship lurching up and down in the waves. I pray that she doesn't hit any rocks during the night. We don't need another problem on our hands. And there is one final thing I have to say. No, I can't help but feel foolish about it. I know that we're the only ones on board. Otherwise, people would have already come by now. We'd be swarmed with crew or passengers, and yet I can't shake the feeling I'm being watched. I know it's ridiculous, but I can't make the feeling go away. I feel like a goldfish with its owner staring at me, and I don't like it one bit. I even took a walk around outside this lounge to reassure myself nobody else is here. I know the captain wouldn't have liked me doing so, but I wouldn't have been able to sleep otherwise. If anyone reads this, can anyone help us? We're only fishermen who've dealt with a 70-foot long liner, not a giant cruise ship or ocean liner. Does anyone know what we have to do to get power going again, where we have to go? If we can get power restored, we might be able to get the radio on board working again, and let people know we're out here. And is there anything else important we should do tomorrow? Anything at all that you can think of? Please let me know if anyone sees this. I'll check back in the morning, see if anyone has. Oh, and one final thing. I don't know if it'll help, but when I went for my walk to prove to myself nobody else is here, I found a life ring which had the name of this ship stamped into it. And then, so maybe someone can look to see if the ship has been labeled missing or something, which would work to try and get someone to know where we are. The name of the ship bears the same name as the huge, almost creepy looking painting on the wall that in the dark I try not to look at.